Ever finished a mix that sounds perfect in the studio, but completely falls apart in the car? If your mixes don't sound great everywhere, it's probably not your fault. It's your playback system tricking you. But fixing this is easier than you think if you understand 3 key factors. First, studio playback systems. Second, consumer playback systems. And third, your own personal listening preferences. Let's break it down. In a perfect world, our studios will be neutral with perfectly balanced speakers and in an acoustically treated room. But in reality, most rooms and monitors mislead our ears about what is happening in the mix. Some systems are too bass heavy, some systems are too bright, some may mask the mid-range, or it just may be completely uneven in unimaginable ways. These issues in the playback systems obviously impact our mixing decisions. If your setup leans too far one way, say too bass heavy, you'll unconsciously compensate for that, making your mix too harsh or too thin. So let's talk about how to balance our playback systems. Achieving a balanced playback system requires a few things. You need proper speakers, some room treatment, or maybe some high quality headphones. In addition to that, I also highly recommend room or headphone correction systems. A couple options are the IK Media Arc, which analyzes your room and applies corrective EQ. There's the Trinnov room correction, which is an advanced system for flattening out the room response with a really nice playback EQ. And then there's Sonarworks, which neutralizes headphone frequency imbalances. There's a lot of options out there, but those are just 3. Proper speaker placement and correction tools help you create a neutral monitoring environment. In this room, you'll notice that there's perfect symmetry from left to right. That is a really important part of creating balance without a skew to the stereo image. Now, once you set up a neutral studio playback environment, the next thing we want to think about are consumer playback systems. Now, we can't control how consumers listen to music, but we have to at least consider it. Consumers listen on different systems. They have bass-heavy club systems, mid-forward, cheap Bluetooth speakers, or bright laptop speakers. We really can't control what our mixes are going to come out of in the consumer world, but we can think about them and try to find the best balance that is going to meet all of them right in the middle. A lot of people that listen to music tweak their own systems. They may crank the bass on their stereo, they may use bright headphones because they prefer them, or they'll add subs to their cars. It's the wild west of playback systems, and you can't mix for perfect translation on them all. However, a well-balanced mix should hold up across the majority of consumer playback systems. Now, the last thing to consider is our perceptual preferences, or more simply, our listening preferences. Like consumers, where they jack up the bass or listen on bright headphones, we as engineers have preferences as well, and they show up in the playback systems that we build in our studios. Everyone hears sounds differently. Some may prefer deep bass, others may prefer a brighter sound. So our own personal taste as mixing and mastering engineers can impact translation as well. For instance, I boost the low end slightly to counter my preference for a little bit of an inflated bass sound in my mixes. I know that if I mix exactly how I want in a perfectly flat studio, I may tend to make mixes too bass heavy because of my own personal preferences. So by tuning my room with a little bit more bass, I know that I'll create mixes that are not too bass heavy. I'm essentially tricking my ears to make better balancing decisions in the studio. So let's go back. How do we fix our setup for better translation? First, balance your playback system as best you can. Treat the room, place the monitors correctly, and use reference tracks while you first start working in the room. One trick I've used is to adjust my setup so that my favorite commercial records match my personal preferences. So if I mix that record myself, I would think it sounds perfect in my room. Ultimately, what you want is your favorite mix to sound exactly the way that you want in your room. You can look at graphs, you can look at all these analyzers, but the reality is your favorite mix should sound exactly how you want it to sound in your room. So put on the music that you love, change your room setup until that song sounds exactly how you think it should sound. You can use tools like IK Media Arc, Sonarworks, and Trinnov to get you there, but really at the end of the day, you want your favorite music to sound exactly how you think it should in your studio. The next thing is to assess your own preferences. Be aware of how your own biases influence your mixing decisions. Do I like things more bass heavy? Do I like things brighter? Once you're aware of those biases, you can invert them and tune them into your room so that you deliver perfectly flat mixes every single time. So finally, you're using playback EQ to invert your own personal preferences and to fix the acoustical issues within your room. Essentially, we're first correcting the system issues and then then fine-tuning that system to your own personal taste. I refine my playback EQ by getting feedback from my trusted clients. If I get feedback that the kick and bass are too loud, I may go into my playback EQ and push up 100 Hz and down. If another trusted client says the mix is lacking mid-range, I may go into that playback EQ and pull down 1 to 4K so that next time I mix, I'm going to boost that range more. So we can't control how consumers listen to music. It's the Wild West. But we can control our own studio playback environment. If we can dial in our studio environment and compensate for our own personal preferences, you'll be in a much better place to create mixes that translate anywhere. That's it for now. If you want to do a deep dive into this, you can check the full blog post below. Till next time.